there and be able to listen to the presentation that's going to be made here. So with me and with us here today, we're privileged to have Dr. David Wilkins, who's authored a book called Dismembered. Today, however, he's going to focus a little bit more on existing versus being dismembered. So I'm not going to try to steal any of his thunder on his presentation and let him set it up for you. But we're going to go ahead and get started here, and I have the honor of welcoming Mr. David Wilkins to the stage. So the podium's yours.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, folks. I haven't given many lunch talks, so if I have a choice between eating and talking, I'd rather be eating with you. But bear with me as I try to share some ideas and thoughts about these important issues that you're addressing. I've known Robert for many years from my days at the University of Arizona, where I first began teaching, and I count him as a good friend. But I only met Richard last year for the first time at the Who Belongs conference in Tucson. The book that Shelley and I wrote, my wife over here, titled Dismembered, focuses on the subject of tribal nations that are engaging in dismemberment policies, whether that's in the form of banishment or disenrollment or denial of citizenship to natives who otherwise should belong to their nations. I've been researching that topic since the 1990s, and I've seen a huge spike in the number of Native nations that are kicking out relatives rather than bringing them in like you're attempting to do. So the talk I gave last year was about disenrollment and dismemberment. And the key word there is dismember, right? And today, and what we've been talking about for the last 2 days, is the more important word of remember, right? Bringing people back home and remembering who we are, as we've been hearing from the various speakers. So I thank you, and I thank Governor Seau for his presence and his good words, and I thank especially the hard work of the Enrollment Committee who have taken on this incredibly important and not easy assignment. Shelley and I are really happy to come back to Albuquerque whenever we get a chance, and especially to drive out here to your beautiful lands. I love the southwestern country. I've been in Minnesota now for 18 years, where it's cold and Scandinavian and Vikings ravage your villages all the time. So that's not very good, but I really like the Southwest a great deal. But I've learned a lot of information these last 2 days that's very useful, and it coincides with the efforts of my own people, the Lumbee Nation of North Carolina, because we're struggling with many of the same issues. In fact, Shelley and I gave a big address this summer in my hometown in Pembroke, North Carolina, on the issue of enrollment and disenrollment. My tribe, as I learned as I was doing the research on our book, we're the tribe that's been engaging in the second largest number of disenrollments. We've kicked out over 500 Lumbee citizens in the last 7 or 8 years. We're about 500 behind the largest Native community to dismember their citizens, the Chukchansi of California. They've literally kicked out more than half of their nation and are threatening to do even more of that. So it's really nice to come to this community where you're talking about bringing people home rather than sending people away from home. So I really am honored to be in your presence and to be a small part of this important conversation, because we should be talking about inclusion rather than exclusion. When I heard the proposed title that Robert and Richard put together, Cultivating a Culture of Belonging, I was hooked and was ready to go immediately. For the question of who we are as Lumbees or Lagunas and what it means to be a part of those sovereign communities is a vital question. It is, of course, a perennial question, since it's up to every generation to decide how and whether their people will continue, right? That's our decision. And for us, the current generations, trying to honor our ancestors and protect the world for our kids and grandkids while struggling to find identity and meaning, the situation is grim indeed. In these tense times, we find ourselves waging this battle on many fronts, both internally, how we define and defend ourselves as individual Native citizens, belonging and beholden to one another. Do we do this with tools like blood quantum, DNA testing, descendancy, disenrollment? And externally, how do we define and defend ourselves as sovereign nations, belonging and beholden to our families, our clans, the earth, and our other relations, with communication, education, court battles, acts of resistance? I would like to start any talk with a quote from my friend and mentor, the incomparable Vine Deloria Jr., a Standing Rock citizen, who I believe was the most brilliant intellectual theorist that any country has produced. He talked a lot about Native identity, and in 1974, he powerfully said this: "The gut question has to do with the meaning of the tribe. Should it continue to be a quasi-political entity? Should it become primarily an economic structure? Or should it once again become a religious community?" Vine was always thinking ahead of his time. 40 years ago, he could see the traps set for us and how we were destined to use them against ourselves. Who are we as natives versus who are we as native nations? For too long, we have uncomfortably avoided or straddled this question: race versus political status. On the one hand, we enjoy the exclusivity of being individual natives, fixated sometimes on our blood quantum by either touting its high-octane strength or worrying that it's not sufficient enough. I think we're sharp and smart enough to recognize that this identity standard conflicts with our future as viable nations, and we've been hearing that throughout the last 2 days. But if I'm busy comparing your birthright to mine, we become the proverbial crabs in a bucket, struggling against one another while somebody on the outside sets the water in the cooking pot to boil. Two kinds of pride, personal and political, always in conflict and diverting our powers away from real threats. It is this tension between personal, racial, and political identity that I want to address today. This, I believe, is where we must focus our attention if we are to protect our lands, our waters, our sovereignty, our treaties, and ultimately our people. Native peoples experience discrimination like all groups labeled as non-white or people of color. Yet our situation is unique and predicated on several pre-existing realities. The most fundamental is that Native nations were fully functioning and long established by the time Europeans arrived in North America, and for a long while after this contact. We continued to wield considerable military powers that warranted a measure of respect. This pre-existing autonomy is the basis for distinctive political, legal, cultural, and property issues that set our nations apart. Our status in relation to the U.S. is first and foremost a political one, steeped in diplomacy and governmental relations. Racial, ideological, economic, and political attitudes can all be used to either support, diminish, or deny any citizen's rights. While our peoples undeniably suffered from such attacks, we have been shielded in ways that other groups have not. First, by our treaty rights, when they've been enforced, the trust relationship with the United States, when it has been acknowledged by the United States, and U.S. plenary power, defined here only as exclusive congressional authority, when it's used to protect us from state intrusions or corporate involvement in our affairs. These three provide our nation and citizens with certain rights and a distinctive political and legal status that no other ethnic group enjoys in this country. Treaties, while battered and abused, have withstood nearly 2 centuries of assaults, from all levels of government, and our nations have fought against all odds to maintain our retained nationhood that treaties, by definition, embody. The trust relationship is also vital, but it too has been narrowed considerably by federal court decisions and administrative actions, and congressional plenary power remains intact. It should only mean that Congress is the primary U.S. entity. Robert mentioned the Commerce Clause, and all that says is that Congress shall regulate trade with us. That's the only power the United States has vis-a-vis our peoples, to regulate trade with us. And yet over time, it's assumed this mantle that they can do anything they want to us. And we know that that's not correct. That's anti-constitutional, it's antitrust, and it's anti-sovereignty. We are now in a new era in American politics, driven by a dubiously elected president with king-like ambitions, right? Where legal precedents, long accepted treaty obligations, and the trust doctrine are now being aggressively attacked. Trump political appointees are brazenly using their bureaucratic posts in government to introduce policies weakening and dismantling infrastructure in every federal agency, including those affecting our nations. With each administrative rule change, centuries of negotiation, treaty rights, legal precedents, and policy are weakened and pushed towards irrelevance. We stand in the way of short-term corporate profit-making. You all know the examples. The now infamous proposed U.S.-Mexican border wall would violate the sovereignty of the Tohono O'odham people and the Yaqui nations by dividing their lands and relatives. The Department of Interior continues to spurn treaty rights and ignores the trust doctrine when it's convenient through aggressive moves to privatize public lands and to destroy long-standing agreements, including construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline and the radical diminishment and sale of the sacred Bears Ears site. And as we heard yesterday, the most recent and shocking attempt to blatantly eradicate our political standing by redefining us according to racial categories was upheld by a federal judge in Texas who ruled against the Indian Child Welfare Act based on that rationale. That judge picked up threads left in the Supreme Court's ruling in Adoptive Couple versus Baby Girl, the Baby Veronica case, wherein the child's blood quantum was cited as part of the justification for out-adoption, even though the Cherokee Nation does not base membership on that criterion. By declaring ICWA a race-based statute, and us as racially based peoples and not politically based nations, the judge effectively said that Indian tribes were like private entities. And since we were not part of the federal government at all, this necessarily meant that we could not exercise governmental power. He was saying that we weren't governments. Right? If this determination is upheld, and it's certainly going to be appealed, concepts like sovereignty, treaty rights, self-determination, and the trust doctrine may soon be found only in history books. A few weeks back, as Robert mentioned yesterday, the BIA announced that it's considering elimination of the historically problematic Certificate of Indian Blood cards, CDIB cards. This seems to me to be part of this movement towards racialization. Tribes have been confused by the sudden turn of events and are demanding that the BIA slow down and consult with us before making any such changes. The IRA, as we also heard yesterday, defines Indian to mean persons of one half or more Indian blood. This provision has long been presumed to be the legislative basis for its issuance of the CDIB cards that many federally recognized nations possess. In fact, the Bureau, as Paul Spruan's research showed, has never received explicit congressional authority to even issue those cards. It simply assumed that it had the right to do that and has been doing it since the 1930s. And that shouldn't surprise us. The Bureau tends to do what it wants to do, right? While the BIA had no right to issue these cards in the first place, now that they have long been accepted by natives and used for both good and ill, I see this abrupt policy change, should it become law, as particularly troublesome for a couple of reasons. The first is timing. It seems to me odd that after all these years, the BIA suddenly wants to let go of this control mechanism, right? We have so many other issues to work on. Why this one, and why now? I think it's another sign that the feds are working to extricate themselves from their treaty agreements and trust obligations, making dozens of seemingly minor changes that won't add up to much until it's too late. Second, Native nations like the Navajo, for example, already have and take on the issue of issuing their own CDIB cards or forms, as Spruan's slide showed yesterday, and other tribes will likely follow suit. It seems a poor and tainted tool that could be abused and used against our own people for dark purposes, just like unjust disenrollment. And then, of course, there's Elizabeth Warren's ill-advised foray into DNA and kinship, which we've already heard quite a bit about. Talk about throwing gasoline on fire, huh? The last thing we need is to once again be in the middle of the Trump-Warren feud. We can only hope that the incident will lead to an awakening and a healthy debate within Indian country. And I think some of that discussion has been taking place in the wake of Warren's DNA foray. While it's sometimes a challenge to parse out truth from propaganda, these threats to our peoples are not theoretical. Concrete, verifiable steps have already been taken to redefine and diminish what it means to be Native throughout the United States governmental bureaucracy. In January 2018, Seema Verman, an administrator with the Department of Health and Human Services, confirmed the Trump administration's contention that Indian peoples are a race, not sovereign political entities, and to exempt them from Medicaid work rules would thus be illegal preferential treatment. Mary Smith, a Cherokee, former lead of the Indian Health Service under President Obama, told the journal Politico, quote, "The United States has a legal responsibility to provide health care to Native Americans. It's the largest prepaid health system in the world. They paid through land and massacres, and now you're going to take away health care and add a work requirement?" Make no mistake, this is a deliberate, coordinated strategy. Stripped of our political powers, we can be dismissed and mistreated in the same ways as other so-called minority groups. But there's nothing new here other than the outward circumstances. The United States is yet again working a race-based angle designed to diminish its trust and treaty obligations, to save itself money, plunder our remaining resources, and ultimately reject our sovereign status. They were pretty successful with blood quantum, a term so familiar that we forget it is not a traditional concept, but it arose, as we've learned in the last couple of days, in the late 1800s as a key assimilative tool in the U.S. arsenal aimed at trimming our rolls, and then claimed fulfillment of treaty obligations at a much reduced cost to the United States Treasury. Then as now, cutting our numbers saves them money and empowers them to take more. The idea of racial purity is, of course, an absolute myth. As Vine Deloria noted, for Native peoples, membership or citizenship was a function of clans, families, and adoptions. No tribe, Vine said, or no people for that matter, anywhere in the world, is genetically pure, now or at any time in the historical past. Why can't we accept that obviously sensible fact and move on? Why, in fact, do we play into the hands of those who wish us harm by perpetuating the idea of full blood, 3/4 blood, 1/4 blood, or now Elizabeth Warren's 1/64 or 1/1024? Why can't we move on and return to a more sensible understanding of what it means to be Laguna, Santa Clara, Zuni? Standards set according to blood quantum and genetic analysis also attack the very fabric of our societies by weakening and sometimes even replacing traditional ways. It is this that is most worrisome to me. We are all smart enough to tweak these modern identification formulas so that we will not literally drive ourselves into extinction that way. We always find a way to survive. But we are nonetheless losing something deeper, something uniquely ours, pre-existing means of establishing kinship ties, clan networks of mutually beneficial relationships, and distinctive ways of interacting with all our relations that have been in the making since time immemorial. Ella DeLauria, Vine DeLauria's aunt, a prominent Dakota anthropologist, described in great detail how the three interrelated kinship systems, blood, marriage, and social, work to create a web of responsible interrelationships, culminating in this simple yet profoundly important concept. She said, "I can safely say that the ultimate aim of Dakota life, stripped of accessories, was quite simple. One must obey kinship rules. One must be a good relative." And we've been hearing that word a lot these last couple of days, right? It is all about our relations with one another, with the land, with species, with everything. To be a good Dakota, then, she said, was to be humanized, civilized. And to be civilized was to keep the rules imposed by kinship for achieving civility, good manners, and a sense of responsibility for every individual dealt with. She wasn't speaking simply of genetic ties, but was invoking a broader and highly sophisticated genealogical and clan-based framework that has enabled families to retain a vividly and assiduously traced recollection of their ancestors, both immediate and distant. So why are race, kinship, and belonging such a big deal right now? I think Matthew Fletcher, a native law professor, in a 2016 article summed up the situation quite well when he said, quote, "The continuation of Indian tribes as sovereign governments in the United States depends in large part upon the distinction between Indians as a race of people and Indians as citizens of Indian tribes. To blur or eliminate that distinction is to take an axe to the trunk of the tree of federal Indian law. Federal laws applicable to Indians would be subject to the U.S. Constitution's prohibition against racial discrimination." So once defined solely as a race, just another ethnic group in the American melting pot or salad bowl, we could be quickly stripped of our retained political power. You may ask how this can be possible since our nations have exercised sovereignty since the beginning of time, and even the U.S. court system has recognized this, albeit reluctantly and sporadically over the decades. In fact, the Supreme Court was on our side when it affirmed the important distinction between racial and political identities in the case that Roberto mentioned yesterday, Morton versus Mankery in 1974, ruling that a BIA-implemented Indian preference employment practice could not be racially discriminatory because the preference was for Indians as political entities. The justices likened the practice to state governments giving employment preferences to state residents, not as affirmative action for so-called minority groups. But that case is 40 years old now, folks. I think we would all agree that most of the current members of the U.S. Supreme Court would not see the issues in the same way today, right? And now with the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, whatever you may think of his qualifications to sit on the court, the numbers are absolutely stacked against us. Kavanaugh is on record more than once as saying that Native Hawaiians and Alaskan Natives are not and should not be recognized as sovereign peoples. How long do we think it will be before he gets to cast a deciding vote on whether or not the Yakima or the Cherokee or the Laguna will have their inherent sovereignty diminished or outright denied, whether by a Trumpian presidential executive order, a court decision, or a congressional statute? It's my job as a native political scientist to study the patterns of political behavior over time, and Kavanaugh's appointment is just a piece of the entire picture. I've been tracking this building backlash against Native power that really kicked into gear with the advent of Indian gaming and the benefits gained by some nations from gaming revenue. Do any of you remember how Donald Trump, then seeking to undermine tribes' ability to operate gaming facilities, testified before the Senate in 1993? He questioned the legitimacy of Indian tribes based upon the physical appearance of their members. He displayed an ignorance and a racism regarding our peoples that is manifested in his current actions. People will always tell you who they are if you just take time to listen, right? That same year, Trump, in an interview with radio host Don Imus, complained about Indian identity. And here's what he said: "It's just one of those things that we have to straighten out. And, well, I think I might have more Indian blood than a lot of the so-called Indians that are trying to open up the reservations. I looked at one of them. Well, I won't go into the whole story, but I can tell you, I said to him, I think I have more Indian blood in me than you have in you. And he laughed at me, and he sort of acknowledged that I was right, but it's a joke. It's really a joke, right? And we know that's how Trump views our peoples. Make no mistake, folks, this is the attitude, the ignorance, and the racism that is driving federal Indian policy and intergovernmental relations today. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, a key part of his vision for making America great again appears to be terminating or dramatically reducing the political power of our peoples in order to extract whatever monetary value can be found in our business enterprises, our peoples, and our lands. The U.S. was founded and financed on the twin evils of slavery and the dispossession of our people's lands and resources. Trump's promised renewal, it seems, may well come at our expense. This time, we could be bloodlessly swept aside by dozens of bureaucratic changes and most likely a devastating Supreme Court decision or two. And Congress will also likely weigh in, since Republicans still retain power in the Senate, although we know that Deborah Haaland is going to make a difference on the House side, right? Our worlds are being sold to the highest bidders. Eventually, they would like to turn it all into money that they benefit from and not us. In a way, we should be encouraged because even though the actions are new and modern, the strategies for termination and monetization are the same. We have seen this playbook many times before, so we should be smart enough to recognize and defeat any attempts to weaken our nations and our kinship bonds. It's nothing new. I don't know how more plainly to say it, folks. It's those who seek to classify Native peoples and individuals as a race, and we must include ourselves in this, are using our own insecurities against us with a goal that might lead to a diminishment of our political sovereignty. Formulas of blood quantum and its more scientifically elegant relative genetic testing are more than just efficient ways to maintain our nation's roles. They provide a new justification for terminating our sovereignty by those who lay in wait to exploit our lands, relations, waters, and people. In conclusion, the deceptively simple, seemingly neutral scientific approaches to determining who is or is not a bona fide native will continue to be tools eagerly seized and wielded by some native leaders who wish to consolidate their short-term power at the expense of their communities. The federal government and others waiting to profit from treaty and trust-protected tribal resources are eager and willing to exploit our internal divisions and embrace blood quantum, DNA, and other non-native definitions of belonging. These identifiers have been politically weaponized, and if we don't forcefully reject them, they will be used to redefine us solely as a race. We could very well then be absorbed into the larger body politic devoid of sovereignty, treaty rights, trust protections, or self-determination. The Trump push towards authoritarianism, in essence, is the greatest overt threat to our treaties and native rights since the termination era of the 1950s. Finally, in closing, Vine Deloria's words are once again helpful. Sovereignty, he said once, for most Indians, This means a defense of the political status of the tribal government. But he said, what about the rebuilding of the family, the clan, and small community in ways that give us a distinctive profile as a responsible group of people? And there's that word responsible again. We've been hearing that a lot in the last couple of days. Too many people, Vine said, continue to wallow in the past, reciting the losses that we have suffered while neglecting to get our traditions and culture back by simply practicing them. And that's what I really enjoy hearing Richard talk about, the original instructions that you have as your foundation. And I think every indigenous people hold those as well. Our power, our sovereignty lies in practicing our ways and in defining ourselves on our own terms, not by the measures of the federal government that divide our communities and leave our relatives open to exploitation. It is critical for tribal nations to reject tainted membership calculations and to reestablish traditional clan and kinship relationships, and to understand and embrace the fact that our kinship connections can, do, and always have included those who are not ethnically indigenous. Because when communities use easy formulas that sever a people from their origins, sustenance, and historic means of relating to one another, they further their own cultural ethnocide. We must reject those ways and both draw from and create new traditions. Otherwise, we will witness and be active participants in seeing the sovereignty our ancestors fought so hard to retain be diminished or completely curtailed by today's fashionable racism, malice, and greed, whether practiced by external or internal actors. Thank you very much.
Let's give him another round of applause. It's pretty good. We didn't have this particular presentation set up for questions and answers, but we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and his information was, I think, very good. And so I want to see if we can take a few minutes to allow some of you to ask some questions or comments if you might have any. So let's open up the floor if there's any comments, questions. Might still be eaten. And by the way, I'd encourage you, while you're thinking, the sandwiches that were up here, they moved them to the back, so there's 2 tables. So again, please help yourself. There's a lot of food, so please help yourself. Are there any questions? Going once? Okay, here we go. Way down here, guys.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. It really opened my eyes on a couple of aspects related to the political nature of, or context of membership. My question to you would be, from a political standpoint, do you see any, I heard a lot of pros to why we should be setting up our own future on our membership, but do you see any negatives of using lineage or non-blood quantum structures in your research? I ask that mainly because I think we're here to have a frank discussion. I see a lot of, I'm for looking at lineage, looking at our current roles as a foundation, and then building lineage a part of that. And I've done some research on we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what future Congresses are going to do, future Supreme Court decisions are going to, what decisions they're going to make in the future. and how they would view not having that biological measure, so to speak. So that's what I ask you today.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think lineage is the path that a number of tribes are moving toward. They're trying to get away and do away strictly with the fractionated dimension that we've all been hearing about for the last 2 days. And that's one of the things, that's why I like Ella Deloria's. She wrote a short book called Speaking of Indians. It came out in the 1940s. And she has one chapter where she describes the kinship system that the Dakota historically had and still have today. And she described those 3 layers that constituted their kinship, both the blood, which is, I have children, and my children are related to me by blood, right, by genealogy. And they will have grandchildren, and I'll be related to them as well. But then you also marry into families, and that family can be a non-member, it can be an African-American, it can be white, it can be who knows. And they become your family as well. They become part of your kinship. And then that kinship also extends into your social relationships, right? And we heard yesterday from that wonderful presentation by Mr. Solomon. And so we know that historically we were a much more open and inclusive people than we have become. And I think lineage is one mechanism that will eventually lead us toward a path where we can move away from this idea that there is a single definition of criteria that works for everybody. I think it's an important mechanism. My own tribe, the Lumbee, when I was preparing the presentation this summer, in our Constitution, we have its lineage, if you can trace back to somebody on one of those early rolls or censuses. But then they also have a second criteria that you have to maintain contact with the tribe, see? And that's where it gets really interesting, because who gets to determine what that maintenance of contact looks like? I haven't lived at home for over 40 years, but I go home whenever I can, and I maintain contact with all my brothers and sisters who live there. But if I had to take that Lumbee civics test that they put in place, I would fail it, and I could be disenrolled, literally, see? And I would no longer be a Lumbee. That's ridiculous. And so I reminded the tribe that historically, the first question you asked another Lumbee when you met them was, who's your people, right? And where are you from? And that's what I've been hearing here, what village are you from, right? And who are your relatives? That's how we establish that network of kin. And that includes blood, that includes clans, that includes multiple criteria. And from what I was hearing, and I like that naturalization ordinance that you put up there yesterday, and I've been seeing other Native law professors and other Native tribal judges beginning to understand that we need to find a way to incorporate non-biological members into our nations, grant them citizenship rights, because they've earned it. Historically, we did that quite often. The 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma adopted many people married into the nation regardless of their race, and they gained a measure of citizenship rights. And that might be one way to fend off a Trump attack against us as racial people, strictly, see. And I think the naturalization provision is a wonderful, and I'm going to study that and maybe make a recommendation to my own tribe about that, because I think it's an important one. But lineage is always going to be a part of who we are, because we are connected organically, right? And that's where this notion, the word membership and the word member, when you think about it, if you lose an arm from an accident, you've been dismembered, right? That's all that means, right? Because we were connected together at an organic level. And citizenship is another important word, but it has a more political base, whereas the word member, when it's understood in its original meaning, its original etymology, is about being biologically connected to somebody else, see? And so I go back and forth between those two concepts. But I think the emphasis, as it has been here from what I've been hearing from you all, is the importance of the clan system. And I've heard that from Iroquois people that I've known over the years. I heard one Mohawk give a speech one time where he said, I belong to the Bear Clan. And he said, when I travel, I meet other bears in Montana, in Arizona, in New Mexico, and they're my relatives, see? I think we sometimes wrap ourselves so tightly around the concept of sovereignty that notion of nationalism pushes us away from those clan connections that we know are more important. because they established that organic linkage that we share with Native peoples, not only in the United States, but in Canada, Latin America, around the world, right? So I really, the clan system that you have, I think, is vital. My own nation, our clans have sort of, over time, dissipated, but we still live in certain areas which I think were originally clan places. So I've encouraged the tribe to revitalize that, create a new tradition of clans, right? Traditions are about creating new ideas and moving forward, not just looking past, right? Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Again, thank you so much for your presentation as well. I think it added a whole new dimension to our thinking too. And really for me, that focuses around advocacy in the future. And, you know, in several of the cases that have been pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, there's been allusions to the doctrine of Christian discovery. And that seems to be, you know, being sort of resurrected in the courts again as something, as a basis, you know, or foundation for the right to undermine the ownership and the membership, or overall the sovereignty, David. And as I look ahead, I'm wondering, because of the seeming dysfunctionality of some of our national organizations, you know, where you might see the strength in other organizations, and, you know, to be more direct, you know, I'm concerned about NCAI, because they are a representative organization supposedly for a lot of tribes, and maybe some that don't have access to litigators, that really don't have money to pay for any kind of court action, and maybe not even to participate as amicus curiae to talk to their own interest or present their own interest before the courts. And so maybe there are pockets, you know, where we need to, pockets of advocacy, where there are organizations that are constantly working to defend our rights that we might not be aware of. I know some of the ones, for instance, I'll give you an example, and you know, some of the ones that really have come to our rescue to help us with these battles are some of the national churches, which is unusual, where they've taken action to repudiate by resolution or formal church action the doctrine of discovery, and that's a difficult one. So I think of, you know, NARF and maybe some others, you know, where they're taking that on, and as we know, advocacy is kind of like a day-to-day thing that needs to occur. And so I'm wondering, essentially the question is, where do we put our money, where do we put our support, where do we put our encouragement in terms of these national organizations, especially ones that you might see that are really functioning well to continue this advocacy for all of us as Native Americans?
Very, very good. The doctrine of discovery is an interesting concept. When I first started studying under Deloria, when he established the master's program at the University of Arizona, we started reading court cases and started learning about the basic doctrines of Indian law. And one of the things that Vine emphasized, he said, never take what a legal doctrine says, interrogate it, investigate it, dig down to its source to see what it really means. And so I wound up doing that with a number of the important legal doctrines that we hear a lot about: the trust doctrine, plenary power doctrine, reserved rights doctrine, and of course the doctrine of discovery, because that one does seem to be a foundational concept. But as I researched that and wrote a book in which I included a chapter about that, as what the data shows historically, when you look at, I mean, we're on Laguna land right now, right? Does the United States own this land? This is your land, right? You emerged here, or you descended here, however you came to this place, this is your territory. And so when you look at the doctrine of discovery, how it's been defined over the years, it originally meant nothing more than that the discoverer, whatever that European discoverer was, they simply gained the right to be the first purchaser of any lands that a tribe might be willing to sell. And it didn't take our lands away from us. It didn't negate our land rights to our own territory. It was an exclusive. It was a process put in place to prevent conflict between European powers who were competing for the right to come into our territory and negotiate with us, right? But over time, it's gained a different mantle and different understanding. But I fight back on that because there were nearly 400 treaties signed, right? And Native peoples wound up surrendering some of their land, but what they didn't surrender, they kept to themselves. And it's our territory. It's not the United States, see? And so that's one answer to that. In terms of the organizational structure, this was another area where I learned a lot from Vine, because when Vine was the head of NCAI in the 1960s, at that time there were only 4 major national Indian organizations, right? And he said he could get on the phone and be in touch with the leaders of those 4, and they would come together, put a strategy together, to fight off termination, or to fight off some dam, or to fight off some taxation scheme by a state. And of course now we've produced many hundreds of Indian organizations. Some of them do really good work on incredibly important topics, but we sort of lack that cohesive overall structure, which is why Vine also suggested at points that we needed an indigenous European Union, an indigenous African Union, some kind of overarching national indigenous body that would not just be an interest group, but would actually have some enforcement power, see? As Shelley and I dove into the dismemberment issue, we learned that the National Congress of American Indians, the Native American Rights Fund, the National Indian Gaming Association, they've never taken a stand against the disenrollment and dismemberment that's happening to our own people, see? And I raised hell about that, and will continue to raise hell about that, because those organizations are supposed to represent you, the people, right? And yet they represent the governments, but not the people. The people are the sovereign, right? The governments are just the delegated officials that have been delegated some authority by the people, right? And so I think we need to come up with a new mechanism. We have a number of regional bodies that do incredibly important work. Northwest, the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. In the Great Lakes area, the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission. There are a number of other regional bodies that do great work, but we really need a broader structure, and we're seeing some evidence of that take place in the form of modern-day treaty making, right? I mean, in the last 5 years, there's been 3 international treaties signed: the Buffalo Treaty, the Grizzly Bear Treaty, and the Tar Sands Treaty, that have over 40 member nations signing on both the Canadian side and the United States side. So we need to keep engaging in those kind of diplomatic efforts with one another, which is part of what we did historically. I've often wanted to learn more about the All Indian Pueblo Council, because that was an important organization for your peoples that helped you fend off the Spaniards for a long time, right? And forced them to deal with you as sovereign peoples. So we have the capacity to create these organizational structures that can help us defend our rights both internally and externally.
Thank you so much for your sharing of this information with us. I just wanted to comment and say that I'm really thankful that our discussions are open and frank, and really looking at including the talk about racism. And when we're really trying to help unveil the deep structural institutionalized racism that exists and how it impacts our nation, and to hopefully be able to understand that it's not an individual kind of stereotype prejudice of how individuals treat one another, but rather to really take a good look at the structural inequalities, and to think about how to dismantle those. And you, Mr. Wilkins, and several of the other speakers have helped us to understand how to deconstruct that, and hopefully we can use those tools to our advantage. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Oh, right here in the front. Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Here and then here.
This isn't a question, it's just a suggestion. I've read through a number of the documents that were included in the workbook of the 2017 Who Belongs Conference. I think those documents would be very, very helpful to the people if they had access to them. One of the documents included sets out various kinds of questions that the people ask themselves that have nothing to do with blood and have more to do with relationship and how relationship is defined within your communities and the investment that you make in it. And because it is puzzling to sort of try to figure out, well, how do we go from this place to that place? And I think if that information, some of that information could be shared with the people, it would be very helpful and kind of expand people's thinking about what it really does mean to belong.
It's a great idea.
While they're making their way to the next speaker, the question Evelyn asked in the book she's referring to as part of the conference last year, there's a book that's about that thick, and it's a lot of different legal documents. That conference was actually directed more to law students and lawyers and that faction. But to her point, there's some very good documents in there. The council, we did give them copies of it. So we'll see what we can do to make copies for folks that might be interested in it. So thank you for that reminder. Yeah, we'll need to figure out how to, because that book's like that thick, so, and they're all different. Okay. Sure, absolutely, and we'll go through that process to figure out which would be those best articles, because it's a conglomeration of different articles. So we'll do that and try to figure that out. So thank you for that reminder, Bernard.
Thank you, Richard. How much more time do we got? If we don't have much time, I'll make it real quick. But anyway, the washtree, strawashwap seyopa. And something that I learned this morning from Alvin was I was thinking about it, and he said, "Amor no mas sans truce." Be nice to each other. I was talking with the other speaker before lunch, and we were talking about the clan system. And I said, when I was growing up, that's all I knew was the clan system. And then just at our past feast that we had at Laguna on September 19th, I was looking at one of my sister's granddaughters, and she did not marry within the tribe. But yet she still has her grandmother's clan because it was her daughter. That was her daughter's daughter. And I was sitting there and I was watching her dance, and I was thinking to myself, she's Hanusta Shashka Hanusta. She's a big road runner. And I said, and no matter how many kids she has, all of her daughters are and her children will be Shashka Hanutsta. Even though she's 1/8, 1/8 Laguna. You know, if the people see some kind of conflict there, you know what? Our Creator doesn't. He acknowledges that's who she's from and all her kids. And that's the way I see it. And so our clan structure is what I knew when I was growing up. And that goes for all of my sisters that bore daughters that have that are Shashka Hanutsta, as well as the people here that, you know, wherever your mother's clan was from, even if they marry outside of Laguna, when your daughters carry that clan, they're always going to be that. And the Creator cares about that. And He knows that. Even though that some of us might forget, He's the one that knows. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. So we'll take one more question here, and then we're wrapping up so we can move on to our next one.
You know, in listening to all of the discussions back and forth, can't help but think that in this continuing work, we need to assure our people, and including the tribal council and other officials, what sovereignty really is. We can use the word over and over again. Hopefully we hit once out of 10 times. But what came back to mind was here a while back, very recently, the Secretary of Interior did away with the requirement for tribes to get approval, secretarial approval, to change items within the Constitution. That is no longer. Okay, and even at the very basic, I was serving in council at the time. We had a question in there by one of the council members. Why do we need the tribal secretary's approval? The person had totally misunderstood what we were talking about. We were talking about the Secretary of Interior's approval, which is no longer, thank God. But those are the kinds of confusions that can occur. And I encourage all of us to continue. And then getting back to the other speaker's presentation yesterday, I spoke briefly about what should be when entry into the kiva occurs, the male members. And as soon as I left here, someone approached me and tried to chastise me. And certainly, I think that I just touched on it. I didn't get into the depths of it because every time we speak about that, it leads to controversy through that misunderstanding. And I think, again, we need to assure that as we continue the effort in revitalizing the language, and I spoke some negatives on that also because I had some deep feelings about it. I need not repeat it today. But, you know, even a young lady spoke just before our lunch break. And in speech itself makes a difference. She says, "Tawastiask." Good morning, one person. "Tawaschayask," 2 persons. "Tawaschayask," 3 or more. And then some of the speech is feminine, other is masculine. So those are the differences that I hope we try to clarify when we undertake that other work that's being proposed. And I speak this with an open mind. I grew up in a very traditional upbringing. My grandmother was one of those little girls that got carted off to St. Catherine's School when they were carting young people off the reservations. So she spoke some English. And when we shared the meals in our extended family, you insert one word, sugar, you're asking someone to pass you the sugar. She just ignored you, like she didn't hear you. And her emphasis was, there will be a time and place for English. Learn your language first. And I don't recall ever resenting that, being corrected. But that's how important it is. And getting back to what the speaker yesterday touched on, was the wholeness, the whole person, when we talk about membership. Acceptance of one another as a whole person, because someone could be 1/4, let's say, but they speak the language very fluently. And there are others who could be 4/4 and speak very little. I am no spring chicken, I'll tell you right now, but people my age today out there at Laguna speak very poorly. Very poorly. That's how bad it has gotten in some cases. I admire a youngster, a young man who is currently serving as a staff officer, but I heard him speak to the people, and I complimented him, and I think we need to keep on going in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
I want to extend appreciation very deeply to Mr. Wilkins for his presentation and the information that he shared with all of us. So with that, round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Wilkins. So we're down to our last major presentation to the day, or for the day, and we have one more after this, which will be more just an overview from Lorraine on the enrollment office and what's happening there and the trends that she's seeing and the numbers that you're seeing, or we're seeing there. But in particular, to this presentation, with me on the stage is Governor Sayo and former Governor Johnson. That I've asked to assist us with us on this particular discussion. And it's titled Relearning Self, meaning relearning about ourselves and re-recognizing some of those things that I think have been pointed out the last day and a half or so. We've seen the past, how do we see the future? This is an opportunity to hear from our sit-in leadership as well as from former leadership on what they have seen with membership, what they see now, what they hope to see for our tribe going into the future. We can define ourselves with finite terms, in other words, policy, blood, quantum, or we can define ourselves and our existence with infinity, meaning to last forever, with things like our clans, our family, and belonging. For the leadership to have a conversation about what we should be cautious about, what we should be excited about, and what we need to prepare for is the main focus of this particular discussion. And as you listen to this presentation and you listen to the dialogue, Think about the power that we have to make a decision that strengthens the collective. The opportunity we have to relearn each other and renew our community. Renew the value in family, clan, marriage, and those types of systems. And what is our responsibility as a family and a community? As the Kiva leaders talked about yesterday, Ayawish, family. And I would also ask you to think about, as we're listening to the conversations and we're winding down the conference here, and we're going to ask you to be thinking about this, hopefully around your kitchen tables at dinner time or supper or whatever, and then, village meetings, wherever. But I would also ask you to think about, what have we done right? What have we done right? We haven't done everything wrong. And as we go into the future, let's think about it in that context. What have we done right? Because you've done some incredible things, and those that came before us did some great things. And those things, like, as was mentioned, language and those kind of things, the fact that people try, let's encourage that. We'll never be perfect, but let's try. Right? So think about this. Think about this conversation in that context as we go forward. So with that, governors, thank you again for joining us here and spending a little bit of time. This last year and a half has really been focused on Governor Sayo and the council's directive to the committee to think about how do we inform and how do we educate and how do we equip our people to be able to help us with a positive outcome in how we perpetuate our existence. There's no blueprint, there's no plan, here's how you do it. There's no instruction book. So we're working this together, and we're doing it as we go. But in that, I think, leaves a lot of opportunity for everyone to engage in this. But in that effort of trying to inform and educate, we know that you both have great history about our Pueblo as it relates to provisions of the membership policy, the Constitution, ordinances over the years. And in particular, Governor Johnson has many years of that. So what I would like to ask you is to be able to take some time to reflect on that experience and the visions that or not visions, but the experiences you've had, but also a vision as to what would you see our future being. So I would also ask you to think about, as you're both grandfathers and great-great-grandfather, what do you hope to see for your grandchildren when all of us in this room may no longer be here? What do we want to leave for them? So the goal of this is to hopefully plant some seeds in the minds of our folks to be thinking in that same regard, because there's grandparents out here, there's great-grandparents. What are you thinking about? What do you want to leave for your children as well? So we'll start with the first part of the membership piece and the provisions and those elements, and just your reflection and how you think about this.
Thank you very much. It's good to see each and every one of you, and we give thanks for the good meal that we had today. When I was asked if I would participate in the session today, there was some confusion in my mind as to really what it is that we wanted to try to accomplish at the session this weekend. But I think it's become quite evident during the past couple of days, just by the nature of the presentations and the discussions that have been had so far. What gave rise to the need to have this session are provisions in, at least a provision in the one of the constitutions, one of the more recent constitutions, a provision which required that a person filing an application for membership had to do so or have their application filed within 2 years of the date of their birth. But you know, as you look back over the constitutions that have been adopted over the course of years, there always has been some form of a timeline prescribed within those constitutions. And you can't help but think that it was probably for the sake of trying to ensure that the process of determining who meets the criteria for membership could be made within a specific period of time. And so I think that probably is the reason why these timelines were included in the various constitutions that have been adopted over the years. When you look at the 1908 Constitution, you have to wonder, why was the Constitution adopted? What were our ancestors thinking of back at that time, which convinced them that they needed to formally organize through the adoption of a constitution? I think it probably may have been the result of the influence brought to our community by the non-Lagunas who had become associated with our community, namely the non-Indians who came to reside here and married into the Pueblo. And there was also, of course, the representatives of the various religious denominations who took up residence here as well, and some of our educators. I think they all had some influence in convincing our people that a constitution should be adopted. The IRA Constitution, which was adopted in 1958, 49, came about as a result of the encouragement, I would think, of the federal government, because the the Indian Reorganization Act, had been adopted and passed by Congress in 1934. And one of the provisions of that law was that it encouraged and it gave tribes the authority to organize themselves through the adoption of formal documents, i.e. the Constitution. And the BIA developed, there were two things that happened with respect to membership issues. One was that every tribe in the country was compelled to determine whether or not they wanted to be covered by the provisions of the IRA the Indian Reorganization Act. Our Pueblo voted in favor of it, as does, I think all the other Pueblos took similar action. They voted in favor. The only Pueblo which did not vote to be covered by the IRA was the Pueblo of Jemez. But some of the others, like Laguna and Santa Clara, they began the process and actually got to the point of adopting constitutions. And that's really what gave rise to the practice of our adopting constitutions, which set forth the powers of government as conferred upon the respective governments by the people themselves. So there was rationale behind the reason why that Constitution was adopted in 1949. And of course, in 1950s, late 1950s, when that Constitution was adopted or revised, the motivation was not only had to do with membership criteria, but it also had to do with the sharing of resources, because by then we had come into the possibility of resources coming into our community, either through primarily through the operations of the mine, which was here at the Pueblo. And then in later years, when the most recent Constitution was adopted, it was, as has been pointed out, it was adopted so as to eliminate or make some changes relative to how membership was determined, the timelines that were set forth in that Constitution, namely the timeline or the imposition of a 2-year span within which people could either file applications for membership or have their parents or guardians file applications for them. It's been surmised that that was one way of maybe limiting the membership. But really, and I happen to be active in tribal government during the years that was under discussion. I was tribal secretary from 1961 to 1964. But that particular Constitution was then under discussion. And I remember going to each of the villages and out to the colonies and explaining to our membership the proposed changes in that Constitution. And one of the major changes was that two-year limitation. And I can still hear our forefathers or our ancestors, our fathers or our grandfathers speaking to the very point of the need for that requirement to be included in the Constitution. And the reason for it goes back to the discussion or the information that was provided to us yesterday morning by our religious leadership. One of the virtues that we have is obedience, responsibility. You know, that actually what they were telling us was that there's not a problem with that 2-year limitation because you as the parents are responsible. One of your inherent responsibilities is to make sure that an application is filed in behalf of your child. And so that provision got a lot of support on that basis. And of course, when the vote was actually taken, that provision, or the Constitution was adopted, included with that provision included. As I think that the point that we're at now is that there's been an awful lot of information developed as to the whys and why-fors of why the past constitutions were worded as such. We take that information now and we massage it and we determine how best can we use that information, or how best can we refer to current practices in order to come up with a process or a standard that will allow us to achieve what it is that we want to achieve, and so that we can continue to be known as Lagunas. How do we identify as Lagunas? Again, going back to the presentations yesterday morning, we identify ourselves as Laguna by how we feel in our hearts and in our minds. We don't necessarily have to have a piece of paper that says you're 1/4 Laguna in order to have that feeling. How do we know? How do we know ourselves as Lagunas? That's in our own hearts and in our minds. But for the sake of political processes, I guess, and record keeping, we need to have some standard. And so now it's shown that it has been shown that the current provision that we have for determining who becomes a member of the Pueblo is not really going to work for us in the long run. There were some options that were identified for us, and each of those options need yet to be massaged so that we can determine which option, or are there other options that will actually enable us to fulfill that requirement of the need for some formal statement as to who can qualify to be a member of the Pueblo of Laguna, and how can we, or what standard can we adopt that will continue in perpetuity, although that's not going to be the case. Every single standard, every single option that we identify is going to have some limitations along the way. You know, that's already been proven with other communities. You know, some have suggested that maybe our criteria for membership should be based on inheritance, maybe on residency, or perhaps on lineage. We're going to have a lot of roadrunners if we do that. That's my clan. Anyway, the point that I want to make is that, you know, today's session, yesterday's session are just the beginning. And it's a commendable effort on the part of our government this year, the Tribal Council and the committee that they've established to try to conform to our directives, you know, almost without fail. At any public meeting, we hear the admonition that, well, no, it is, that's my role or that's my right to have an input, to have a say-so as to what the council should do and what standards should be adopted. Here's an opportunity for us to be able to fulfill, to be able to make our own comments, put forth our own suggestions. The past couple of days, we've heard individuals get up and, from the standpoint of their thought processes, they've come forth with some observations, some recommendations, and some suggestions. You know, I think it's mentioned that there are now 8,000 plus tribal members. Look around the room. If there's a couple hundred of us here today, it's sad, you know, that we really don't take advantage of that opportunity. Because it's extreme that we want to have some input in the thought processes that our tribal government goes through, you know. It's going to, without question, it's going to be a major challenge for us to find and identify and adopt the right standard that will allow us to be able to operate under that standard for an extended period of time. You know, let's not fool ourselves. It's not an easy task. It's a tremendous task. and it's gratifying to know that we're going to be given more opportunities to have input. With the information that we received over the past couple of days, we can take that information, begin to massage it in our own minds, and come up with our own thoughts and our own ideas as to how we think or what standards can be adopted that will allow us to become, that will allow us to at least in the white man's way, be known as Lagunas. I think that's what the objective is, and we're taking, I think it's a good step. The past 2 days are a good step leading towards the ultimate end, which we hope will be that which is in the best interest of our community.
Thank you, Governor. My father-in-law is a roadrunner, so I'm not going to comment on the roadrunner piece. So, Governor?
Thank you, Governor Johnson, for that. You know, Governor Johnson has already provided a lot of the information as it relates to the policies that were developed and created there at the Pueblo, as it relates to how our membership is recognized. You know, some of those policies were developed, and they're outlined in the brochure that you have on your table regarding the various revisions to the Constitution over the years. So, you know, I also just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, I served as a Lieutenant Governor under Roland Johnson. I served as Lieutenant Governor under Harry Early. And, you know, these gentlemen do have a lot of knowledge about, you know, how the Constitution has been revised over the years, a lot of the policies and procedures that were created for enrollment purposes. So I don't want to, you know, go over what Governor Johnson has you know, stated regarding the revisions in the 49, the 58, the 84, and the 012 constitutions. But, you know, over the years, the Pueblo has evolved to where it is right now, and we are starting to see that some of those policies that were adopted or created are going to be, you know, problematic for us going forward if we don't make additional revisions to our particular constitution. But you know, we're glad that you all came out today to provide your input over these past couple of days, and we're going to need you to stay engaged going forward to develop what it is that's going to be needed to move us into the next centuries, into the next millennia. Hopefully we're still here that long from now, but you know, this is very important. But you know, Rich asked, Rich asked us to provide at least, you know, some insight on what we would like to see for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. You know, one of the things that I would like for my great-grandchildren, my grandchildren, and those that are coming later on is to know who they are, know where they come from, know what it is that we were given, we were blessed with. Those are some of the things that, you know, can only be taught by the families, by us. And that's what I'm hoping that we can all do as Laguna people, is to let them know the creation stories, let them know the emergence stories, let them know the migration stories, how we came to this area, who we're related to. We are a big family. You know, we have, I don't even know, you know, my ancestors. I can only go back so far, and then we lose track. But, you know, one of the ways we can probably pass on this information is to start creating family trees, you know, and using some sort of a mechanism that shows who our relatives are, who our clan relations are, and pass that information forward so that my great-great-great-grandchildren will know who I am or who I was or what I was. And I'm sure that all of you, would probably, have those similar thoughts and want your children, your great-grandchildren, and those that are coming to know who we are and the things that we've been through, the history of our people. We do have our history documented in various ways, but to sit in the council chambers where the men gather on Easter, we have the Easter week, we have those stories that are passed on by word of mouth from our Kiva leaders, from our elders. That's where it's very important for our men folks to gather at that particular event and learn all of these things that we were taught. How we were created, how the stars and so forth were placed in harmony in our universe, and all of that is all taught and talked about at that particular event. How we emerged, who we sent to check to see if things were ready for the people to bring out into this world. All of that is taught there, told there, and how we migrated and so forth. All of that information is very important to know who we are, to know where we come from. And I'm sure our children will, appreciate that if we can, somehow get that information out to them. I'm sure there's already documents that are out there that, have this stuff written down, but it's more meaningful when you hear it for yourselves. So I hope that all of this can, be relayed to my great grandchildren. I hope that we still continue to have these kinds of, events during the Easter. But we've lost a lot already. We've lost a lot of the societies that we once had, and we can't stand to lose anymore. So it's critical. It's important. So that's my hope for my grandchildren and going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. And Governor Johnson, would you like to reflect on that as well, what you would like to see for your grandchildren?
Thank you. What do I want for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren? What I think the most important thing that I'd like for them to have, I can give it to them without having to have a constitution or without having to have something that's in writing. It's something that comes from what knowledge I've acquired over the course of the years that I've been some 80. I just turned 80 a week ago, and during that, thank you. During the course of that time, I have been privileged to be very much a part of not just the social life of the Pueblo, but the governmental affairs of the Pueblo, going clear back to about 1957 when I graduated from high school. Back then, the council representatives from the villages were delegated on a meeting-by-meeting basis. And apparently, the staff officer in the village of Powati felt that I had something that I should be able to contribute because of the fact that I had made it through high school. And so I was often delegated to attend council meetings at Laguna. And I always remember the admonishment given me a lot of times by the older members of the council, because most of I think there were only one or two of us who were probably under 20 years of age and were a part of the council's discussions at the time, but the rest were all older men. And oftentimes they would admonish us to sit and listen. Well, ayun sa na chikuya, no human true, that was their admonition to us. And so I've tried to follow that, and over the course of years, I've been able to develop a lot of information that I try to pass on to my family, and particularly my grandkids, and now my great-grandchildren. But in terms of benefits, what I'd like to see us have some kind of a system or a process, or at least a membership. We've addressed the membership issue in a manner that will afford our up-and-coming children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the opportunity to benefit from those resources that our Creator has given to us. We sit here in a facility, and every time I'm coming home from Albuquerque, and I look out across the Rio Perco, and I see this facility, I recall that even back in the 50s, when I used to go to council meetings, there was already discussion about development at this location. And back in those days, a lot of reliance was placed on the BIA in terms of helping us or helping the council to determine whether or not this was an ideal place for any kind of development, primarily commercial development. And it was always a negative. There was, well, there isn't enough water there. There have been studies done. You can't find any potable water at that location. So, okay, then years would pass, and the elders kept talking about development here. And so finally, in the, I guess it was probably 90s, early 90s, the council decided, well, you know, all these years we've been told that we can't develop that property for the reason that there's no, you can't find potable water at that location. Let's find out for ourselves. Let's use our resources and see what there is in the way of availability of water at that location. So the council appropriated funds with which we could do some drilling, test drilling. And you know what? Lo and behold, we found potable water. And that's what gave rise to the development of this facility. And as I say, it brings back to mind the fact that the council's worked so hard to try to make things happen, to try to enhance the economy of the Pueblo through the development of our commercial enterprises. And we're grateful to our Creator that Ayeshchani is the term, Laguna term, that you use for identifying a resource that has been given to us by our Creator. But I would like to see us develop a process, or at least some standard, which would give assurances that my grandkids and my great-grandkids will be able to benefit in some way, whether through employment or whether through educational programs that are made available by the Pueblo, but financed by the income generated or revenue generated by the various enterprises it is that we have. That's what I see as, or I hope for, looking to the future. You know.
Thank you, Governor. So they both said a couple of things here that I think are pretty significant, and the main one I want to underscore is what Governor Johnson said, in that he doesn't need a constitution to give his children or grandchildren what he wants to gift them, right? And I think that should be for all of us. And that caused me to think about, you know, some of you may already be doing this, And, maybe reflect on I mentioned my father-in-law earlier. One of the things I see him do that he's so very passionate about is he makes sure his children and grandchildren know this is your auntie, this is your uncle, this is your brother. He makes it a point that they know who their relatives are, his family. And I think that is a key piece that the two governors are talking about. And that's such a heartfelt thing to see, because that doesn't require a constitution. It doesn't require money. All it requires is your heart and your passion for your family. And that's probably the most valuable gift that I think I hear the two governors saying that they want to leave for their grandchildren as well, that they want them to leave or know that they belong, who they're connected to, who they are, but how they are. And the other piece is the leveraging of resource, so that our people have the ability to survive economically, but also the ability to leverage the knowledge and wisdom of the community so that they advance in their, whether it's career, work, home, whatever. So I think in order to get those things, we have to make sure that we're working as a strong collective tribe together to move those things forward, as the governors are articulating here. So one of the other things that I know Professor Hershey mentioned earlier, the humor and the laughter, and we're always reminded when we do our work to be happy, to be joyful in the work that we do. Even in rest, be happy, enjoy your relaxation. Our clan systems, we have in place. We joke with each other about our clans, tease each other, but it's also a very profound system. And so could I ask you as well, maybe to think about, when we're looking at belonging and identity, what is your take in how we use that system maybe as a mechanism for folks to think about, as to how we use that as a mechanism to determine how we belong? What does that mean for us going into the future?
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and start. For me, I think it's very important that we somehow use the clan system in how we recognize our members going forward. For me, I'm a water clan. On my mom's side, our clan system is a maternal system. But in my family, the water clan is going to be, dying out, because I don't have any sisters. I have 5 brothers. But, my kids, they take the mother's clan, and that's the turkey clan. So I think, it's important that we also include the clan system in some way in recognizing our members going forward. But, as I mentioned earlier on, the clan system is also important, not just for recognizing your own family members. There's the larger clans that are involved for various activities, especially on the religious side. That's how important it is when you sponsor. The clans come together. The sponsoring clan and the child, or the person that's the sponsoree, I guess you would call him. But both sides come together, and that's how important the clan system is. So that's one of the strengths that we have, and we need to somehow embed that in the way we recognize our members going forward. So those are my thoughts on that.
Can you elaborate a little more on the question?
So the question was, as we look at how we define and try to identify and find solutions to how we identify and belong going into the future, what role does the clan system play in that, and what is the value of our clan system?
Yeah, as the governor pointed out, the clan system that we have is one that, of course, has been around for as long as we've been around as Lagunas. And it can, I think, be a very key ingredient in resolving and addressing the issue that is at hand, and that is the development of our criteria to govern how we determine membership in the Pueblo of Laguna. I think that much has already been done in terms of determining kinship through the processes of even research by anthropologists that spent some time at Laguna and actually recorded the clans of various families resident primarily in the village of Old Laguna, but all of us are immigrants from the Pueblo, from the village of Old Laguna. You know, as an example, you know, I live in Powati, but actually my grandfather was from Laguna, and I have relatives in Laguna. Some are sitting out there. My sister's out there, the Solomons and others, and our grandpa Kool-Aid, you know, he was a part of our family as well. But also there was in 1950, 57, 58, during those years, there was an extensive undertaking to determine who actually was a Laguna and what their blood, from what tribal blood, how much Laguna blood they had in them. And so that work has been done already, and from that, you know, you can very easily determine what what clans were in existence and what clan the families came from. You know, so a lot of the work is there. It just I think needs more research in terms of identifying all these resources and collecting all these resources that have been developed over the course of years. And I think it's especially important there. We still have a few elders left. You know, as was mentioned yesterday or suggested yesterday, you know, rely on those individuals. They're a good resource for you. And I think that some of them may have even been a part of the process where a process in the formulation of a basic Pueblo of Laguna membership rule. Yeah, so I would use those resources or rely upon those resources.
Thank you, Governors. And so I think one of the intentions of this particular conversation was, of course, so that you hear their perspectives, their reflections on the evolution of our blood quantum and the provisions in our Constitution, their perspectives from the perch of a governor. What have they seen, and what do they see? What have they seen? What do they hope to see? But the other element of why I tried to frame the questions in the manner that I did is, as they talked about their grandchildren, what they want to leave, what they want for the community, the profoundness and the simplicity of their answers. Very simple. They're not asking a lot, except to be good to each other, to do those basic things that we all desire. But there's such profoundness and deepness in their responses. So I wanted you to hear that. So hopefully that helps to also cause us to think about, we don't have to create a complex system. It can be pretty simple, but it could be very powerful because of its simplicity. So that being said, I'm going to go this far with the questions or the conversation with the governors, and I'm going to allow a few questions to be asked of them, because this is also a very rare opportunity that we have with our former governor as well. Two governors sitting here that you get a chance to talk to, like Governor Sayo. I've had the opportunity to serve under Governor Johnson as a council member as well, so he's been not only our leader, but our mentor, our father, our grandfather. So we're all students of his, I guess, and continue to be students of his. And we've learned a lot from him and continue to learn a lot from him. So that's our privilege, to be able to have the benefit and access to him whenever we want, and we have the opportunity to call him on his cell phone, and 9 times out of 10 he answers. And so we're really thankful and privileged of that. So that being said, let me go ahead and open up the floor for any questions or comments you might have for the governors.
There's 3 governors up here, Governor Luarkey and Governor Johnson. So I also wanted to acknowledge Governor Dr. Luarkey.
Questions back there?
Cái when say opa the wash up opa. I have a comment. After hearing discussions and information shared at this conference, I realize how important my role is as a tribal member, and we as parents and future parents need to teach our children about the responsibilities of tribal member of Laguna, and that we shouldn't be pointing fingers at the tribal council, but looking at our personal responsibilities as a tribal member. Mayuna hashame naishia tapum kai weheme.
Don't
cái to hộp bao giờ to rồi rồi một cái mình số trên kéo siêu thế sự ít nữa đã là siêu chỉ siêu nữa có những mắt chân đi chung tôi nói chứ trên to những mắt sinh sinh cũng ta cái sẽ có cái comment đáp đấy chứ在做好知道学个站，或者喊你们也说这个嘛，这个嘛，在这些各位个莫说啥的，在这慢慢个嘛，各位个么子打，我莫说嘛，这你在站呢，我是不是就什么，就比早我拿去。这个嘛，我没开，我大多少去，第三个湖北，我从那说那，在这湖城西站，是什么？是可以看到国在可以了，是话如果湖城有谈，没有嘛，是干，เป็นสปาร์กู开始多那，可呀个。我是都还能微微在呢，一些这个没有的，在下跪呢，就是说他在后头吃着，我是这个所谓的些，还能，是我说在这，我是说只有多呢，还能用什么在哪个做事，我们都是结果呀，我个在那是说他。这些公务员，几行什么时候能做？那去我们这去咋子个？该带我再说是，带我再说是，是我们后些一些去的，我们还能什么时才就是什么？我说什么都我做些去，我些过海那我能说。在这哈的没有告诉你，我说就去，该个黑嘛，有的说找那个，该嘛参加莫说，哎，都那下子，上那个说是，都我该刚结果说是， hecho. Wasanata. Se muchos na hos kautsani. Usamatano. Satim kakatato. Kuna matanato. Etatin no etuna. Amusta baba sarantimshi. Ne putana sko satyo. Sami niwa petia sos. Momo zaran tot. Tuna tusish. Tasha seminat. Eko tumentit. Eto shika na zik seminat. Esko pet. Ciu petanshi. So hai muchitan. Te moshi tatu skupetana na kitset. Okei, kun tuotimis tänä sitten, se mettis joku nähti joku, en mä voimme tunne, että se on. Tuo, ei se tuhat, tänä suni se tupsi, ruosi tänä se, tämä ei, se vannamatta. Kai se vaatimus siika sijaitsi, kaikka voimme skasatso. Et mi chatstuna. Umatos kawatan, hina, protayawa. Jutros, hanemeshia, wakshitan. Nyt sääti kaetuni pseasinsi hanemenia. Siinä mä, ja wakstasinsi. Et hina. Kai me saamiset nää tuteksuus. Ewa wai tseshi, tuna, tabo pa tykti emshi, tsiweshi tachi. Kaika, ai hartse me maama sestaatio. Kai huetu tumaksu wok, tiemitsa, maasatsa. Ei hanu maamaksta jäämme ukkoja. Kai tuonu aatkusuus, jäämme ukkoja. Sä et se moi. Unettimin joutaksu asuman. Mutti siis jeesi. Nutti mu. Tuna kaanja. Mak tsaatjaamme sabina suma. Tsaati keskuma kiskaa tuus. Eta suu kaima seena taakona. Seema mitu metriä suutia sani. Kuusaan. Tadi syusan, mitä mettä soutjatani. Maamme tuoti kavassa muukai ja kait. Ewa muu, siknasi, muutuna, me ruuma tivitaan, kuinka kait jo. Tätä muutti kuusaito, tätä kotonima saito. Maamme muutuna tätä jumme. Eikä syöpytä näin kieksuus, että saape, kuakuin taaksuus, että saati vete kojaita. Että sinä kai me ties joko, että asian saati jaksuus, maailman kaimassa kauikka me saan. Maailma kauiksi kaikka kajunnou ja tauit. Näin teikurit se. Ewa Valentin Leon, David Leon, Carl Leon, he kuatimme tiemme. Ois kawassa tiemsi, kannantim, kapapa tiemsi. Se on sauit. Saati se kaikki nimo. Ei se tikku punin saati, se me Leon, se me se sauit, we. Amo sanoi kautu kaituna tekaa. Ei se koko ti, tämä ja tauit, se kai lion, se kai se. Vaikka se suni, kakkuetitu. Minä tuo, you professional, progressive people. Ti suni kieko, o se romti, että me saa tiesi. Jos tunnaa seitsi, hän on juuri samaisena suusaatsi. ma kai ka chi mo tu na har se me sa sta ju ta shi ta cha chi na tu si spatava sus ekskona ma et ko ha ma ko de ju ka shu te chi ko so te cha cha so za cha mo so za na na se papa di mi tu na sa wa ti sta ni ki ta ko wa yi ko na ska papa ka dana tu na mo ir ti pa di sta ni to ti ne ko tu na ma yu de我个些我一这些在他们在这里过啥的而之后会在个呀过到外头打第二年打去就后面怎么过我个些这些我些就啊比巴的过程呢在这过程这个好吧说下好多在那面说在看这说说下农在说那俺们啊说呢嘛在说不好一些是都很没刚才个切什么大些是热成了些是吃了往事的不你个也少不你个也没的一个在村里嘛是I did your the great grandfather and the judge. I had to see the judge's go to make when you start kind of Gotchen Torres. Because I see women Torres, the last name, Mitch. Joking, you so we had to Gian, you what the Marcus. I joking. We told that the mom checking that. Yeah, most I didn't touch her. Okay, that's the surname. So, what's that? So, Taurus. What she was you got in Taurus. It's good cotton. It's Paco. But you told them, Smith on the high. A sheet up, goat up. That's had the surname. Walk still the hand to ceremony. So it's from the surname. So you talk with. Esto que tu mañana te como que me cruza no la cruz a tu na hano es un cruza cruz
Doi, Mr. Leon, we're going to call on our interpreter to interpret for us.
Tawai, it's a day minach, Kumako, the Tashi, and New Stratsign, yeah. And I just thanked Mr. Leon there for speaking in our language to us. And he kind of, I'm not saying he scolded us. I'm just going to say that he kind of put us in our place in our language. And I didn't catch all of it. I didn't think he was going to speak all the way in our language, but so I just caught here and there. So I'm going to see if I can try to translate what he said in English. And like I said yesterday already, it's kind of hard to do that because sometimes we don't have words in English. I mean, in our language that the English language has. So bear with me. I'll try and see if I can kind of tell you what he said. And the first thing he asked us is why. Why don't we speak our language anymore as Lagunas? And then he kind of came back and said, because we don't speak it anymore because we don't love Laguna. We don't love our language. That's how come we don't speak it no more. Now, if we loved our Laguna, the people and everybody, I'm thinking that's what he meant. Our land and everything. If we loved it, we will be speaking our language, all of us, each and every one of us will be talking our language, which makes a lot of sense, you know, and I'm glad he brought that up. And somewhere we've been told that we will meet this kind of stuff here that we're going through now. We don't talk our language anymore. And if we're not careful, the white man's going to take over. And so he's kind of encouraging us. If we love our people and love one another here in Laguna, we can be strong as people here in Laguna. And we've heard that all the time, that, you know, we should be. We should love and care for each other here in Laguna and speak our language, you know. And the thing is, you know, he said not to scare our kids as far as, you know, what could happen in the future. Make them understand that these things are happening, you know, and make them understand that, you know, this is what's happening right now here on the reservation, instead of trying to scare them off just to maybe so they won't question you anymore. But these are some of the kids, I mean, to let your grandkids, your kids know that these things are happening. And he says he talked to his grandkids or great-grandkids in our language, and they seem to be understanding. So that's kind of encouraging, and I think that's what we should be doing to our own kids and grandkids, you know, great-grandkids, to be talking to them. And and his mother, I guess his grandkids' mother or his daughter maybe also talks to the kids, and, you know, they understand each other and they participate in dances, and, you know, and I guess just like it was mentioned that, you know, we kind of make fun in our language and say, I don't know if it was meant by saying that this is how they were dancing, you know. He told them in his language. So that's, you know, something to kind of look forward to. And then he said he wanted to thank the presenters that were brought here on this topic here that we've been talking about, like our Blar Quantum and all the people that you guys brought in here to present all this stuff. He wants to thank you people for coming out. On behalf of Mr. Leon, thank you for coming out and helping us out, you know, kind of making us realize what's going on and everything. So that's what he said, and he's very thankful. And to the government here, Laguna, he says, we can be pretty strong, and there's always going to be people pointing fingers at us, the council, the governor, and everybody there. But, you know, don't let it get to you. Just keep trying and doing what you think is better for the people, and, you know, keep it up and don't give up. You know, you'll I guess maybe pan out and everything will go right. And I really don't know what he meant about he got pushed out. You know, he says he got kicked out, but no, I mean, he says he didn't leave on his own, but he got kicked out. So I don't know if he meant, you know, out of the reservation or what, but anyway, that's what he said. He didn't go voluntarily, but so they kicked him out. That's sort of something he said. And then he talked about our village officers, our merumas. He said, right now, the merumas that we have here, well, he mentioned Insinal, he's kind of, I guess you might say sorry in a way, I don't know what else to use, but that our younger merumas, they don't know what's going on as far as what the old folks used to, how it was carried. And I mean, they just go, I guess, headstrong into whatever they think should be done, you know. They don't try and take it back to the way it used to be a long time ago. But and he's told them, you know, you guys come over to my house, I'll teach you how it was run a long time ago. And, you know, maybe from there you can see how the villages should be run as far as being a meruma. And to start start talking our language, if you really love Laguna, you know, and all the people that, you know, the old folks, we've been talking about the old folks that that speak the language, nothing but our language. They're gone, you know, and he mentioned a few of his relatives that are gone now, and they pretty much talked our language, all his people, and he mentioned Kama and up north, you know, he says he might have family up there up north too, because he said there's some Leons up there, so I don't think he's too sure if he has relatives up there but the name was up there, so he thinks that they're his relatives. And right now, people are just scattered all over the place now. I mean, we can't seem to come together, and that's going to continue if we don't start talking our language again. You know, we're just going to go here and there, and you know, so that's how come he kind of encourages us to start speaking our language again, so we can all be here as one, Lagunas, you know, and like it was mentioned already that we're not individual villages. Yes, there are 6 villages, but we're all Lagunas, and that's one thing that, you know, he hopes that they can all come together again, or we can all come together, and to think about the kids, you know, listen to them. Right now, nowadays, we, as parents, grandparents, we don't take time to listen to our kids anymore. We just, you know, let them go. And we all know it. We all probably did it, but of course, we're not going to admit it, you know. We're the parents, grandparents. We don't make mistakes. I mean, let's think about that again, you know. These are some of the things that he kind of mentioned, and he gives or he encourages the council to be strong and do the best for the people, and don't let the people put you down or whatever. If they're trying to point fingers at you, don't let that get to you. And he says he gives his best to you, and be strong and counsel, and he sends his regards to everybody on council and everybody and the whole Laguna Reservation. He sends his regard, and he said he forgot to introduce himself, but he did, and I didn't catch his Indian name, but from the Kiva they gave him an Indian name, but I didn't catch it, so I just put down as Mr. Leon, and he's from Mindanao, and his big son and little turkey, and so he's my same with me. I'm big son and I'm little turkey. So, hello, brother. So, so that's. I hope I kind of, you know, it's kind of hard to catch all that, but I'm glad he spoke to us in English. You know, I mean, in our language, and I mean, let's kind of take that to heart and let's try and speak our language. You know, we're not all gonna pronounce things right. First time, remember, we're all learning. But let's don't put each other's down for that. Correct each other's. Tell each other's to say it the right way. You know, let's don't right away jump to conclusions. Just because you're fluent doesn't mean the next person is fluent like you. Teach them. Let's teach each other's. That way we can all learn and speak our language all together. I hope one of these days we can all speak our language when we meet somewhere. Okay? Say all this stuff. I mean, it makes me feel good when I hear people talk like that. Whether it's a young kid, or old man, old lady, whatever. And, you know, even people that are not from or don't live here on the reservation but are Lagunas. They, it's nice to hear them talk. And I know you guys can talk. It's just, I don't know why. You guys don't do it. Either you're ashamed to talk our language, or you're afraid. I don't know. I mean, that's only you know. So let's kind of, you know, try to speak our language from now on. And I'm pretty sure if you ask the creators, our spirits, to help you, they will. They will help you out and make things clear for you as far as speaking our language. But So I hope I covered everything that Mr. Leon said. And so with that, I'll get back to the presenter.
Thank you, Alvin. So all of you that made comments in this last section, thank you very much. And so we're going to go this far with this piece of it. And so I want to extend my deepest appreciation to Governor Johnson and Governor Sayo for joining me up here on the stage to have this conversation on this piece and how we want to maybe start thinking about those elements to help us move forward in a positive manner for our community. So thank you, governors. Okay, we're down to our last presentation today, and I'm going to call up Lorraine Silva to make her presentation for us, and she's going to just give us a picture of what's happening today in enrollment. So our numbers and some of the things that they're seeing as applications come in, but we'll leave you with this piece of data. And then we're going to then just go ahead and wrap up with some closing remarks. At that point, I would like the committee to all come back up on the stage when Lorraine is done. And we'll finish up. And the governor will also be up here with us, and he'll make some closing remarks and some insight as to maybe how what some of those next steps might be. So get Lorraine up here. Just one announcement. You see the young ladies walking around trying to pick up the survey. So if you still have yours, please raise your hand and get it to them. Thank you.
I think that's good. Put my eyes on. Kawati Te Hopa. My name is Lorraine Silva. It's Lorraine Sayo Silva, for those that don't know me. I'm from the village of, originally Laguna, but I married in the village of Pawati to Lawrence Silva. And my mother is Virginia Mariano Sayo. My father was David Sayo from the village of Siama. I'm Ushrat Hanutza Tzitwashchi, and my mother originally comes from the Mariano family. I've been working with tribal enrollment for over 26 years. I was hired as the enrollment clerk when Josie Lucero was still there. And she was my mentor, and as Ron said, she had so much knowledge of tribal enrollment. And when I became the enrollment manager about 7 years ago, it was big shoes to fill, I guess to say. But she taught myself and my tribal enrollment clerk, Barbara Naya, who's also been there for a number of years, and what she knew and the processes of enrollment. And through the years that I've been there, we've gone through a lot of changes. We've seen changes in numbers in our enrollment. And of course, we went through one constitutional amendment, which was the elimination of the 2-year time limit. But in case those of you don't know, the qualifications for enrollment, and they are stated in our Constitution, And we have two forms of membership. One is regular membership, which is membership with full benefits. And to be a regular member, an individual has to be 1/4 Laguna. No other Indian blood, just 1/4. And as Dr. Lewarke had stated, in our 1959 or 58 Constitution, an individual had to be 1/2 Laguna. And then the constitutional amendment in '84 lowered that blood quantum to 1/4. And that's where we, like he had stated, we see that rise in enrollment, and then we kind of go down and level off. And in 1984, we saw that rise again, and then in 2012. And right now, on an average, we enroll anywhere around 120 new members every year, and that includes regular members and naturalized members. And naturalization is the other form of membership that the Pueblo of Laguna has, and you've heard it been touched on several times. And in order to be a naturalized member, an individual has to be 1/8 Laguna, but they also have to be 1/2 total Indian, and that would be of any federally recognized tribe. And a lot of individuals, myself included, always felt that, in a sense, that's not fair, because to be naturalized, you have to prove that you're more Indian than to be a regular member. And currently, naturalized members don't receive any tribal benefits. They're eligible for federal programs, federal services, IHS, but a lot of our tribal programs don't fund naturalized members. They're not eligible for educational benefits through the tribe, through the LDOE, and they are not eligible to vote, to own land or livestock. And these are some of the benefits that, as a committee, we feel that the naturalized members should be afforded. And there was a time back in 1991 when the Enrollment Committee was tasked to come up with benefits for naturalized members. And those were the main benefits that they had came up with, which was education, inheritance, voting rights, land and livestock. But I don't know what happened back then, where that recommendation went. It was never approved through council. And like I said, today it currently states that they don't receive any benefits. As a matter of fact, in the resolution 101-3-90, it states in there that naturalized members are only afforded the benefits that are expressively stated in this document. But we've looked through it forwards and backwards, and there's nothing stated in that resolution that says what their benefits are. And as Dr. Lewarke had pointed out, back during all our research preparing for this conference, there was a document found dated back to 1958 that stated that naturalized members, after completing a probation period, would be afforded full benefits. And like we said, that's something maybe it was brought to council's attention if that's something that needs to be looked into. But currently, that's the way our membership, our qualifications for membership stand. And if those of you that got a brochure, I had made a chart that's up on the wall here. And what it is that within the last 10 years, it's slightly needs some updating, but I had created the chart here just to show how our membership has, what our membership looks like currently. Under the column 4/4 Laguna, that represents Laguna blood. Within the last 10 years, we had a total of 4 full-blooded tribal members that were recognized. Out of those were 2 male, 2 female, and the second column represents those that are between full and 3/4. And you can see the numbers, and then again, 3/4 to half. And if you'll notice, the last column are those that are between 1/2 and 1/4. And that's where our biggest membership comes from. We had over 1,000 members within the last 10 years. And as I know Governor Sayo had mentioned, when we go to council, the majority of our enrolled members are at 1/4. And like it's been stated over and over, blood quantum can only be reduced until you eventually get to 0. So currently, at a quarter, about 25% of our tribal membership is a quarter Laguna. And when you think about those individuals being a quarter, if they don't marry or have children with another Laguna member, their children are not going to be eligible. And I believe, and I know that seeing the numbers that we bring in every quarter, council began to get concerned, and this is where the questions were starting to be asked were, where are we headed, and where's our the use of our blood quantum taking us? And as you saw in the chart that Dr. Lewarki created, based on our numbers, if we hadn't changed anything, we would hardly have any tribal members eligible for enrollment. But that's the reason why we need to take another look at the way we are enrolling members. And like everyone has stated, we don't have the answers. I don't. Our enrollment committee doesn't. But as a people working together as a community, that's the decision we need to make. And what is best for Laguna, what is best for our tribe, our people. There's no, like I've been hearing all the past 2 days, there's no right answer. It's going to take a lot of discussion and a lot of commitment from individuals who have the knowledge and maybe the ideas of what's best for us. Because currently, we see the numbers, and in a sense, it is scary. It's, alarming, and about a little less than half our membership, actually, it's the same with the 1/4 individuals, their children aren't going to be eligible for membership because you have to meet that 1/4, and if one parent is less than half, their children are not going to be eligible because they're not going to meet the 1/4 blood quantum. And I know a lot of people have stated that, this affects them personally with their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Myself, I have 3 grandchildren, and all of them barely meet the blood quantum. They are members under regular membership, but if they were to have children outside of the tribe, my great-grandchildren are not going to be eligible at the 1/4 blood quantum. But, these are the realities we have to face and start the work on trying to find solutions. And when we had a debriefing yesterday evening, I shared with the group, the committee, and our speakers that when I was leaving here, an individual approached me and she was asking about enrollment. And she wanted to know about her grandkids, and she wanted to know how to apply for them, what kind of application, the process. So I started explaining it to her. And her daughter is a quarter Laguna, a quarter Hopi. So I told her, in order to be natural, and she was asking about naturalization, in order to be a naturalized member, your grandchildren have to be at least an 1/8 Laguna, but half total Indian. And knowing her and who her children are, I knew that they were only an 1/8 Laguna and an 1/8 of another tribe, and the other, which made them half Indian, but their other half was non-native. So I told her, in order for them to be eligible for naturalization, their father had to be at least half or more Indian. And when I said, otherwise, if the father is not, then your grandchildren are not going to be eligible for enrollment. And I mean, to see the expression and disappointment, on her face, knowing that, well, you mean my grandchildren aren't going to be eligible to be a member of the tribe? And this is, the things that we have to deal with in explaining to individuals that inquire to our office about enrolling their children, grandchildren. And when it comes down to blood, we let them know that, we have to go by what's written in our Constitution and our ordinance, and Laguna is a blood quantum tribe. So regardless of, like we've heard over and over, what makes you Laguna, your traditions, your language, your culture, everything, and what's in your heart. Unfortunately, we have to go by what's written, and if an individual does not meet that blood quantum, they can't become a member. So this is why the discussion began, that we need to start looking at how do we enroll members? How do we include our members and make them a part of, to make them belong or to have them belong? And Dr. Luarke had wanted me to share some of this information with you, just to give you an idea of where we're at right now as a tribe. And like he stated, our enrollment is over 8,000. We have 8,501 regular members and 260 naturalized members. And in order to, I believe, to start increasing our membership again, you know, there is a need to find an alternative. What it is, I don't know, but that's something that, like we said, needs a lot of discussion, a lot of thought, and to come to a determination. But, you know, Laguna is the second largest pueblo in the state of New Mexico. Zuni is the largest out of the 19 pueblos, and we come in second. But, and I believe, like somebody had mentioned, Tsuki and Zia are the only tribes that have gone away from the blood quantum. I believe all tribes or pueblos in Laguna are now at a quarter. And they're also looking and struggling with this same dilemma, because we had a meeting with all the 19 pueblos about 4 years ago, all the tribal enrollment individuals, and the question was asked, and this was at the beginning of the discussion of our blood quantum, you know, how many of them were seeing the same issues regarding blood. And I believe at that time Isleta was the only tribe that was still using the half-blood quantum. But they've made a revision to their constitution or their enrollment criteria, and they've gone down to a quarter. And, you know, and I working with enrollment, and we process not just applications, but people, you know, relinquishing their membership or blood quantum increases and different other issues that come up regarding enrollment. And we're seeing I wouldn't say an influx, but because once Isleta brought down their blood to a quarter, almost every quarter that we go into council, we have individuals relinquishing their membership from Laguna to go to Isleta. Whether that's based on cultural thing, maybe they were born, some of them were born and raised in Isleta, that's all they know, that's their culture, their language, and they want to be a part of that community. And at the same time, too, it could be driven by benefits, because Isleta does afford their tribal members a large per capita every year. So like we started out in the very beginning, the discussion on enrollment shouldn't be based on benefits. It should be based on, you know, our grandchildren, our children, what are we gonna leave for them? Where are they gonna be in the years down the road? And like we've said before, and I've heard that we can't just leave it where, with this discussion, this conference, we need to keep moving forward, because it's like putting a Band-Aid on it, and if people say, oh, it's not that bad. We still have 8,000 members. We're second in the state of New Mexico. Still, you know, you put a Band-Aid on it, somewhere down the road, the issue's gonna come up again, 10 years, 20 years down the road, and we're gonna be going through the same dilemma, same issues as we are today. So you know, it's fortunate that our council saw this and made it, I'm sorry, can't think of the word, priority, that, you know, we address this issue. And, and I'm really glad to see that we had the turnout that we did. You know, we were kind of worried a little bit because of it being a Veterans Holiday, and we heard things were going on, but I'm glad to see that we had this many people who are genuinely interested in what's going on with our tribe, our enrollment issue, and I encourage you to keep, you know, talking about it, discussing it, and, you know, share your ideas with us. And if you have any questions regarding enrollment or just want to come in and see us, you know, our door is always open. There's myself, I have my staff, Barbara Anaya, and Kayla Carrillo, who's our data entry clerk. We have our enrollment committee, Elsie Vio, who's been a major part of this conference, is our enrollment committee chairperson. And we have a representative from each village. So if you have questions regarding enrollment, hopefully the ladies would be willing to assist you in any way if you have questions, and we're always there to answer questions or give you help you with, or explain the process with you. But I just want to thank everybody for being here, and I don't know if there's anything else that we need to. That's about it, and I thank you for hearing me, and have a good day.
Thank you, Lorraine. Yeah. And she wraps up. I'm just stay up here. Could the rest of the committee come on up? We're going to start winding down here. Just on Lorraine's comments, and the information she shared with us, I think it's very important that we're aware of what's happening with the enrollment and the challenges that we're up against. And when she explained to us the conversation she had with one of the participants yesterday, I don't know if that the person or persons are here today or not, but she shared the context with us, and that's exactly why we need to do this. I mean, it's, as she explained, you only have to be 1/4 to be a regular member. But in order to be naturalized, you have to be at least 1/8 Laguna and 1/2 other Indian. So it's harder to be naturalized than it is regular, and you get no benefit for being a naturalized member. So we make it harder in some instances, and at the end of the day, the one that pays the price is the child. That's what we need to fix. Recognizing we have the rules and the policies and whatnot in place, but again, I go back to Article 2, Membership, Section 3, Powers of the Pueblo Council over membership. The Pueblo Council shall have the sole authority to determine eligibility for enrollment as a member of the Pueblo. No decree of any court purporting to determine membership in the Pueblo, paternity, or degree of Indian blood or other blood shall be recognized as determinative of membership. But I think that very first sentence is, the council has sole authority. Maybe it's time that we also begin to look at what is that process for special case situations. But as opposed to shooting at things randomly, it's going to be important that we take this in a logical manner and try to get to the solution. So at the end of the day, there's no naturalized, there's no regular, we're just Lagunas. That's the goal we're working for. We're just Lagunas. And the process isn't difficult to be Laguna. So that's what we're working towards here. So hopefully we can accomplish that. And there is some sense of urgency. When we were advised to start the project again, the villages also told us to take our time to be diligent in our work. But I think we also need to have some sense of urgency. And as Governor Johnson, when in his administrations, when we had the chance to sit there and when he advised us as a council, those kind of reminders. But he also said, being diligent and being mindful of our approach doesn't mean that we sit here for 2 or 3 years twiddling our thumbs or just rehashing things. We have to get to some point of a decision. Be diligent and responsible to that decision. So hopefully that advice can be applied in this manner so that we are diligent, but we're also applying some urgency to it as well. So that being said, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here with us today physically, and those of you that are on YouTube. I went up earlier to check the numbers on participation, and it looked like there was, and the folks can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like there was a little over 350 some odd people here yesterday, and another, I think it was 49 that were on YouTube as well. So that puts us a little close to 400 people participating. And those that were online, there were multiple people in some instances. So I'm not sure how we count those numbers, but I think we've had a really good response to this, a good feedback. So I'm thankful for that. And I would encourage that we continue to move forward, trying to work together. And as you have this conversation around this issue at your dinner tables, your kitchen tables, please encourage others to engage in it as well. And I hope that, we're able to plan out more of these sessions soon. And so I also want to say thank you to all those that helped us. Mr. Robert Hershey, could you stand? Dr. Norbert Hill. Dr. Pamela Palmater. I'm not sure where she went. Oh, she's way up here. Kathleen Rattery. Is she still here? Did she leave? Oh, okay. Who am I missing? Is that Dave? David Wilkins over here. His wife, Shelley. Thank you. So thank you, all of you, for your help. I also want to extend a great appreciation as well to the youth group, to all the young people that were running around, picking up surveys and helping us out. Thank you very much. Our facilitators as well, to Tony, Ryan, and Yakome Dawai, thank you very much for your help this weekend. Thank you to the interpreter for helping us with interpretations. We appreciate that. Just a FYI, these are the books that each of the presenters have written. The Great Banishment Act was the one handed out that Norbert and Kathleen did. Dismembered is the book that David and his wife Shelley wrote. Beyond Blood is the book that Dr. Palmata wrote. We tried to get all three books so that we could have them available to hand out. The challenge we ran in with Amazon was that they couldn't guarantee to get the books here by this date. So that was our challenge. Fulcrum I have underneath the Great Vanishing Act, and the reason I listed that, you could also buy it on Amazon, but the reason I listed that particular publisher is that publisher also gives contributes the funds that go towards the purchase of the book back to the Oneida Nation. So did I get that right? Royalties go back to the tribe. So I would encourage you, if you choose to order the Great Vanishing Act online, order from Fulcrum. If you can buy directly from them, I don't know. If not, Amazon's an option as well. So those are the books that are out there on this topic. And I would encourage you as well to, even beyond these books, do your own digging. Just the information we provided here, just don't believe us. If you go check it out yourself. I think there's some really good resources out there for you. And see, the last thing I need to mention. The last thing that I need to mention here is that the council did ask the committee to provide a report before year end. I mean, we're already halfway through November, so we have to do this before the year concludes. In that report, we will include some next steps as to what that could be, and hopefully the next administration coming in will be able to pick this up and move this forward. That will be one of the recommendations that we put in there. And so hopefully that'll be getting back out to the villages soon. And I do hope that one of the actions that the council will be able to do this year with your feedback and input is have the opportunity to formalize that next step before this administration ends, so that we have those marching orders in place for the next group that comes in to take it forward. So that piece will at least be done for them, and they can just continue forging ahead. So that being said, I want to, again, extend a great, I might get scolded, I'm out of the camera area, but I want to extend a deep appreciation to Mr. Filbert Antonio, our staff officer from the village of Encinal, also a committee member. Ms. Elsie Vile, co-chair. Mr. Frank Cerno, tribal secretary. Ms. Lorraine Silva, enrollment director, committee member. Mr. Ed Tremaya, council member, committee member. Governor Sayo, governor, and committee member. I want to say thank you to all of them for the work that they've done in helping us get here. They've done an incredible job. So thank you very much, all of you, and may you be blessed in return. And so we're concluded with our work, with the exception of our report that we have to produce, and I'll turn it back over to Governor to close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Luarke. You know, I want to offer a special thank you to Dr. Luarke. He's one of the co-chairs for this particular committee, him and Elsie, and they've done a great job in bringing this all together and putting up this event today. You know, they've worked very hard over the last year and a half when we gave them the assignment. And, you know, I'm very grateful for Dr. Luarke and all of those a part of this committee and all the work that they've done to move it or to get us this far. And I'm hoping that next administration will be able to push it forward. You know, we're in our last couple of months of my administration. Some of us will be moving out, but we do have some members in tribal council that will remain, and I'm going to look to those council members that are coming back to continue to support this and stay engaged with this particular initiative so that we can, you know, someday it'll have to be put onto a referendum or some other mechanism. We'll have to have those discussions as to how this gets approved by our membership. And, you know, there's the next step that Rich mentioned. You know, I'm hoping, too, that we can also have those discussions in our villages, as I mentioned earlier on at the village level, so that we can get, you know, our more input there at the villages and your feedback. I also encourage those that are out there on the website to, you know, submit your comments in writing as well to the tribal secretary's office. I think that was already brought up by Dr. Luarke earlier on. But, you know, these are some of the things that I'd like to see move forward. And you know, I really do appreciate you all coming out today, because this is an important topic. It is an important subject for the continuance of our Pueblo and our Pueblo membership. So, you know, I hope that you'll stay engaged as well. This is information, education for all of us. You know, there are some things that need to happen, and that will also, you know, I am encouraging you all to continue to stay engaged and let your relatives know about this. Talk to your relatives, your clan members, and you know, again, tawai kai skunoma tana ke kuisha wai tesha tsakana et kai tana yukut stiek so tsaya amoma nitran kai so kai tana it's a umat ut ya nyawa drani ya trumos kuati shania otsi nyukshana strusashi kwa kawai kametsi nyushut na strusashi tishan ewa mehayatsi nutsishtashu nutsishtakrus kuati shania ewa kwa nidran strusa nyodran strusachi tke I'll go ahead and offer the closing prayer, and then we'll allow you to go on your way. cái mẹ này chỉ chỉ nào có nuôi nó mẹ tiêu mà đi ra chỉ hai chỉ sẽ pray up tiêu tu hết nó mẹ sẽ sẽ và cái này sẽ tự chăn nuôi ta sao ít quá sẽ ta số ta tu ta bé tao ai sao vậy mà số chuan nó tràn cái số rồi shot juice sa sang tiệc juice hộp á cái hem ấy số chuan nó tràn.
Ready? Well, I haven't been doing this very long. You notice I put it on backwards. What is this? Screwed here. It took up, 5 or 6 years of nerve for me to put this thing around my neck. Hope you people appreciate it. Just kidding.